Hi guys, welcome to this week's development diary. This week we're going to just kind of run through some of the stuff that we got done through the last week. Last week we had kind of said that we were going to be working on some materials and getting kind of some of our materials up to speed. So we'll jump right into that. So let's have a look. Let's jump over here. I'll increase my camera speed just to make things a bit easier. So if we go over here, you can see that we were working on some of the cliffs. So I'm just going to jump in and play. So you can see we have a lot more detail on kind of our rocky cliff areas. We're using a mixture of stuff there, but I'll just talk about some of the things that I tried during the week and I ultimately ended up abandoning. So if we just, as you can see, some of the geometry is a lot different than it used to be, and there's a reason for that. I was never really happy with what was there. I always considered it a placeholder. I still kind of consider this placeholder, but it's fine for where we're at for alpha. I think in the future what we'll probably do is, as the project goes along, I'll touch it up and redo it, but I'll just go through some of the changes we made. So if I go to some of the assets that I created during the week. So if we go in here to set dressing, you'll notice that I have this cliff section, which is A001. And what I had done is I had done some retopology, breaking it down into more components. And we'll just open up a random component here. And you can see that it had its own normal maps. And although that was working for me, I wasn't happy with the end result. And I wanted to save some time rather than going around and resculpting every entire cliff surface. For now, for alpha, considering it's a small indie project, I didn't really have time to do that. So what I planned on doing is using just some clever material techniques. So we'll go into this material and we'll have a look. But as you can see, we have some rock. It's got normal maps. It's also got some world displacement. I've moved from painting rock onto the terrain to having grass as part of the cliff's material. So we'll jump into some of the materials and have a look. So another major thing was rather have, as you can see, I've 4 textures for that piece of geometry, the cliff that I actually sculpted. And that was just too many components, so and too many materials. So to kind of cut down on the amount of materials that I was using, I said, well, you know, that's a material with quite a few instructions for each section of the cliff. So I said to myself, oh, we'll use one material. So here's the material. So there's a bit going on for the blend of the grass to keep it in line with what is already there. We have a lerp between the two, plugged into a vertex color to allow us to do some vertex painting, and it's basically the exact same for the normals. Over here we have displacement and tessellation. So in the blue channel of our textures we have our displacement. That's basically going back into the vertex in the red channel, and it's multiplied by a vertex normal world space with a constant 1D vector 16, and the two are multiplied together to give us our effect. So you can see here we're getting nice kind of material displacement. So the idea behind this is that basically rather than have a material for every section of the cliff, I can have one material. And just to give you an idea, there's 2 rock textures and 1 grass texture. So what we'll do is I've left a bit of the cliff section that are these kind of rocky sections that I haven't yet painted. So I'm just going to jump in and do this one. So another thing to remember is when you're using the vertex paint mode in Unreal, make sure you save quite regularly. Save before and after you touch any piece of geometry. That way you'll be able to keep everything from crashing and keep everything stable. I found jumping from one mesh to another, things were getting pretty unstable, and I was getting quite a few crashes. So with that in mind, we'll go into our painting mode here. Hope nothing happens. So in our green channel is where our grass is, so we'll just go ahead and paint in some grass here. So this basically enables us to kind of go around and use vertex painting on all our surfaces rather than have to worry about having a material for each section of the cliff. This reduces kind of the number of instructions per material, and also reduces the number of kind of materials used, and hopefully that will kind of lead us into a scenario where we're being a bit more efficient, we're using less memory, less texture samples, and just, you know, enable us to do more with less, which is always a good thing, especially when you're a solo developer or a small team. You want to be able to get the most out of your work. You can see I have some rock here, but rather than change tool, because I know it's unstable, I'm not going to change tool until I finish this bit. So we just keep going until I get to there. Okay, so I'm grabbing too many verts. You can see those it can be hard to see, but you can see maybe on you can see some kind of green dots, and that's basically my verts, and it's kind of warning me, well, you're going to be painting here. I'm cool with that, fine with that. Everything looks a bit Green Hill Zone still at the moment, but we're not going to worry about that. Just as we kind of left the cliffs until we were ready for them, and the rocky sections until we were ready for them to do another pass, we're going to do the same with the grass. They probably will get another see into before alpha, but it's just to get the major material down. We can always overwrite the texture sample in the future. So that gives you an idea of some of the stuff that I was doing earlier on during the week. What I was doing after that was basically coming into my red channel and then just painting in a different rock texture. As you can see, it goes under my green nicely. And if I keep it away from the edge down at the bottom, I should get exactly what I'm looking for. The orientation in UV space matters. It's not always possible to get it flush with your bedding planes and your texture sample of the rock, but it's worth giving it a go, and if you can at all, spend some time with your UVs. I re-UV'd everything in the scene, cliff-wise, just because I wanted to try and do my best to get everything to line up the way I wanted. So it's all about preparation and kind of getting stuff to the point you want. So you can see in a relatively short period of time there, we got kind of the effect we were looking for. Unfortunately, in this version of Unreal, we're limited to a brush size of a radius of 256, which is quite annoying when you're dealing with large surfaces. But if you give yourself enough vertices, if your mesh is tessellated enough, it shouldn't be a problem. So you can see really quickly we start to get results. So I'd imagine, given a few days, I'll have no problem in getting this sorted and looking kind of as I want it. I'm just being careful to keep my detail away from the bottom, because I want that to blend in with the material that's already there. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to right click and play from, actually no, as I said to you earlier, it's very important to save once you've finished painting a section. Essentially, because you're doing vertex painting, you're changing the color information per vertex, so that's actually in the mesh detail, so you want to save that, because sometimes Unreal will crash once you change mode or select a different mesh. Basically because you sometimes have to force it to do that save, because it mightn't want to do it just off the bat. So I see a bit of green that could be done here. While we have it up, we may have to save again, but while we have it up, we're just going to come in and do that. And then I'll quickly do the terrain as well, but I'm going to save again, just because we have edited that mesh as information, so it's important that we do save. Yeah, but vertex painting has kind of solved a lot of issues for me and kind of opened up new possibilities for other places. So we're going to jump in here to our terrain paint mode. We'll go back to our grass and get this all looking nice and happy and working well together. Bring down our feather, up with our strength, down with our size, and we'll just put in some grass here. So yeah, as you can see, there are places around these edges where there is a seam in the geometry. I'm not worried about that. I'll be putting foliage and other actors there to kind of disguise it. I may even put some rocks and other kind of debris and stuff like that, so it'll be very well hidden in the end. It won't be something that your average player would notice. Someone like ourselves now, who's kind of into this, would kind of, who hunkers down in a game and starts walking around looking for seams, just because they're not because they're trying to find problems, they're just interested in how the world was put together. So I find myself doing that a lot in games like Skyrim or The Witcher. It's something that I tend to do. We're still looking like a bit of a golf course, a bit like Green Hill Zone. I'm not really worried about that for now. But as you can see, with the real-time tessellation and the world displacement, we're having an easier job when it comes to the cliffs. So I've gone around the whole map and removed the kind of feathered grass that I had been painting on the train. I've been like feathering from like a dither from rock to grass on the actual train. So I'm getting rid of that, and I'll handle that in the actual cliff meshes. Another thing I've managed to overcome during the week was, so you can see here another section that's finished and waiting to be done. Another thing I managed to come home overcome during the week was we had black artifacts, and you may actually still see maybe some minor ones here and there. I'll try and find one now. Oh, here's one. So these are being generated by our terrain, shadowing that's coming from the stretched faces that are down here. You can kind of see how we would have some trouble with the faces here. So to do that, you can actually see there's a huge cavity now between the two hulls, between the landscape components and the hulls, and that's to try and get rid of some of these shadow artifacts that were happening. If I put up the camera speed, we might be able to find somewhere where these cliffs were particularly bad, and a lot of work was done on them to try and get rid of a lot of those artifacts. And you can see our textures here don't look as nice as they do on the other side because we haven't done any of our painting yet. I'll just try and find a place. I know there's going to be one like in a small sneaky spot. Ah, here's one. So you can see here we have one. I've done my best to get rid of most of them, and that's led to kind of some problems where I have to go around and fix up the terrain at the top of the cliff again. It's even led to some places where that's not possible, and I'll literally have to come in and put some kind of asset to kind of block off that kind of to kind of fix up that error, because rather than mess with the terrain, it's such a finicky thing to mess with. You'd be better off just kind of placing a rock over it. Or kind of some other kind of set dressing as such. But to be honest with you, it's not something you wanna overly do. I mean, if you can fix the culprit or chase down the problem and fix it at source, then you're probably better off doing that. But if it's a case that you can fix it, that it's going to be too much hassle to fix it through the terrain editing tools, don't be afraid to put a rock there, especially if it's not an area that's kind of centerpiece. I'm trying to find one of the particular culprits. I know I'll find one out here in one of these headlands if I just keep looking. Because our geometry changed as well for our cliffs. Some of these are slightly out, so I'm just painting out that detail as we go along. You can also see that our stone from our original meshes kind of make a bit of a mincemeat of... Okay, so we had a little bit of a think there. We're down on a separate component of the terrain. Some of these aren't completely necessary, as I'll be kind of going over them again. But I'm just trying to find a nice example of where the cliff has kind of done a number on me. Okay, so you can see here where it's kind of high. I'll be putting some rock formations in there. But that's one day earlier on that was actually planned, so it's not a great example of how there's kind of holes in my mesh. I think it was back up here. We may have actually passed it. Maybe I did a bit too much work in getting it to look good again. I believe it was here. Yeah, you can kind of see it here. You can see my repair job anyways. So okay, if we come down here, you can see I had lost my edge because I had come back in under the geometry so much that there was actually a gap here. So I'm just kind of keeping an eye on it now. You can see these edges here. What I'll probably end up doing in places like that is slight geometry edits. So grabbing this edge in my content development tools, lifting it and bringing it over to here where I'm shooting the gun. Just so that I have that overlap. So if I can't fix it with the terrain tools, I'll fix it in my content creation tools. We also have little things like this that are just kind of leftovers from where I was fixing stuff. But if we go in underneath, you can see why. I'm just going to reduce my camera speed. You'll also notice I might have some other little problems. If you can see some terrain sticking out there. These are all little niggly things that as I go around and finish the island, I'll be able to get rid of quite easily. So we're inside the actual mesh here now. You can see once that wall disappears, I have more room in some places to work with than I do in others. In fact, kind of changing the geometry to bring it out, you can see it kind of bulges out at the top, which kind of makes sense. That's where you'd have your wear from the sea and stuff. Indeed, I may use another vertex channel on this so that we have kind of limpets and kind of more weathered sea kind of stuff going on here. I also was able to fix up some of the bases. This will give you a good idea of kind of what I had to do in order to overcome some of the kind of lighting artifacts and problems. I had to have this nice flush base for it to sit on, this nice flat base. So that was a big concern for a long time, was those black artifacts, and we've got rid of most of them now. Any that are still there that are kind of really noticeable, or any holes or problems like that, we'll be able to fix using our set dressings and stuff. So another area that I kind of did, you can see another one there. I'm not really worried about them. There are set dressings that I'll be placing in different places, especially places like this, because I want the player to be, if he or she does go into the water, I want them to be able to get up again. But you can see here, this was looking very square and kind of boring, so I kind of manipulated the meshes somewhat to give it a bit more kind of detail. The geometry itself, I need to have a look at its smoothing groups so that we can kind of get the smoothing groups to match the strata of the rock a bit better. I'll increase my camera speed so that we can go up. So you can see, especially in places like this, we have that nice undercut effect. But there's a big difference between the meshes that have been that have their vertex paint and the ones that don't. And it shouldn't take me too long to go around and kind of fix everything up like that. So with that said, let's just jump in and play. So I'm going to grab my Xbox controller here, because I've bound the door opening to the X button. So you can see I've removed a lot of the lights, because now that we're using dynamic lighting only for the time being, I wanted to reduce the amount of lights. So we're looking good. We'll go over and take a look at the cliff, and maybe you'll be able to notice some of the real-time tessellation and just world displacement. So you can see it's got a nice detail to it. If I go right up, it tends to break a little, but it's got a nice bit of detail to it. The water's a bit shallow here. I imagine a small jetty running parallel to that with kind of a nice overhang, where we could maybe do like a two-tier jetty. So there might be a jetty running along the bottom, and another jetty kind of port area here. Again, I'm not worried about these. I'm going to fix them all up, and if there is more set dressings for kind of a port on the top, a lot of this will be changing as we go along. But again, the vertex painting tools give me that option. We do get little areas like this, but again, I'm not going to worry. I can always come along and place set dressing to cover the offending area, or I'll kind of come up with another idea. So with that in mind, there was another area that I have been talking about that I'd hoped to work on during the week, which we didn't get to, but that's okay. I'm just going to quickly save all. Again, because I'm changing tools, I'm leaving the landscape tool and I'm going into just the regular basic tool or mode here. I just don't want to give it any excuse where it might crash. You can also see we have increased the cloud cover, some of the fog is up, and I'm looking into rain at the moment and maybe how we'll implement rain in the future. So here's another section where we're going to be using the vertex paint. You can see it's looking very Green Hill Zone. I've yet to kind of get in there and give it some of the proper detail. But as you can imagine from what we did with the cliffs, that when it comes to the actual lake here and the bed of the lake, vertex paint will quite possibly be able to do a lot of work for us and lift a lot of the do a lot of the heavy lifting. Also, when it comes to doing these paths, we can also utilize more vertex paint there to kind of, again, do a lot of the heavy lifting. By that I mean we can lay down our basic geometry, including the kind of edge of the road, and paint it in vertex paint. What this will do is it'll free up at least 3 texture samples that are textures from our landscape material, because we want to be able to get those back, because at the moment everything is looking like a golf course kind of Sonic Green Hill zone, and that's because we've one solid green across the entire landscape, and that's not very natural. So I'd imagine as we come down closer to the sea, you're going to get different kinds of grass. There's going to be more browns and more yellows in the grass in different places, depending on what kind of foliage is there. So with that in mind, I'd like to get rid of these. Also, the kind of road textures. Also, if we look here, because we've got this 8-bit texture dither, I don't mind it along the beach. We can kind of do stuff here again with set dressing to kind of fix that. But along roads and paths, that looks very unnatural. And even though, you know, a lot of players mightn't even notice it, I think it's kind of a bit too last gen at this stage to be doing that. So I'm going to create the roads and paths separately. Again, we can stream them in and out, and it shouldn't be too big of a deal. They're not going to be incredibly high poly, so it's not something that's going to take a lot of resources from us. I haven't done. I'll just load up some of the other levels so that we can kind of evaluate some of this stuff. Okay, so now we have everything loaded up and visible. I haven't done anything with this village over here, and I haven't really added to this. There are quite possibly the kind of pub or shebeen area to be done somewhere around here. There's a whaling station to go here. Going down this end of the island, we'll quite possibly have our kind of monastery and remnants of an old druid settlement. And then we're going to have a shrine up on the other headland. So with that said, they're kind of on hold until I get the cliffs finished. Give them another pass. Then I'm going to create a path, some path and trail geometry to replace what we're using here. It may be a case, quite often you think, oh well, you know, I put so much work into those, but again, everything's placeholder at this stage, and it's important not to be too precious about anything. Even though we adapted some of our forested area to encapsulate this this path because we were restricted in the number of layer components, I'm not too pushed about changing it at this stage. It's again, I'm not precious. It's something we kind of just have to adapt as the project continues. But these paths, because we were controlling the brush sizes as we went along, are very uniform, so they'll let us we'll be able to place our geometry in there, no problem really. As regards left and right turns, we just have to create one, and then we can mirror it in the engine. So it's a lot of this stuff isn't a problem, and should be easily done. So this weekend I'm going to the Galway Games event. I won't be back at work till Tuesday. So on Tuesday I'd like to finish off the cliffs, and if at all possible I'd like to start making make a start on creating the road geometry and trail geometry. Like we did before, usually the first half of the week will be finishing off what we started the week previously, and then I'll do a bit of a test when it comes to creating the trails and the roads. Again, we're going to utilize vertex painting and some real-time tessellation and world displacement and that. With that said, we should make a lot of kind of gains when it comes to get rid of these trails. We'll get back some of our texture layers per component in our landscape, so we'll be able to do more detail in the grass and kind of get things looking a bit better. They're a bit too much like a golf course now, as I said. So I'd say that'll probably be enough for next week. I had hoped to move on to either start modelling one of the other settlements, either the pub, the Wayland Station, or the Druid settlement. But I think they can wait for now until we get the kind of the more major stuff done. It'd be nice, because some of the other settlements have kind of ruined, run-down assets that are kind of, melting into the environment, and nature is kind of taking them, reclaiming them as such. I'd like to get that grass texture back, and it really would be nice to get at least one more layer per component back, and that's very doable if we can get rid of the roads. So with that said, I think the focus for next week will be finishing the cliffs and making a start on the roads. I imagine on Wednesday and Thursday there'll be a bit more experimentation going on exactly how I'm going to go about that. Some googling, some perhaps some video tutorials, and some searching on the forums. Yeah, but hopefully that's everything for this week. So it's been episode 5 of the Weekly Dev Diary. A day early now for on it today, considering I'm away at the weekend. If there's anything interesting, or come across anything cool down in Galway at the Galway Games event, I'll be sure to mention it here. If I get any videos or any cool photos of stuff that I think is particularly cool, I'll let you guys know about it. So, thanks for tuning in. Episode 5 of the Weekly Dev Diaries is a good one. Take care, folks, and I'll chat to you again next week.